It's June 2024 and I'm on a 25-year-old Fokker 50 of Amapola Flug on final approach to Mariehamn Flygplats on the Åland Islands. This isn't your typical island getaway. Located in the Baltic Sea at the entrance of the Gulf of Bothnia, the Åland Islands are a collection of around 6,500 islands and skerries for a unique semi-autonomous Swedish-speaking region of Finland, with most of the land taken up by Västerhamn, Åland, which is home to around 90% of the population and accounts for 43% of the total landmass of the archipelago. The current capital and largest settlement is Mariehamn, which is also home to the island's airport and the largest of the ports of the island. Covered by thick glaciers that extended over much of Scandinavia, the islands only saw freedom from the ice around 11,000 years ago. With a rebounding of land following the retreat of the glaciers, the islands were pushed up from under the waters of the Baltic over the next couple of thousand years. The first humans reached the Åland Islands around 6,000 years ago, and several Bronze Age villages have been found across the islands. During the Viking period, 6 hill forts were built across the island, along with regular settlements across the archipelago. From the 1200s onwards, the islands came under the control of Sweden, during which time stone churches were built across the islands, and the fortification of Castleholm Castle was constructed. Ongoing skirmishes and wars between Denmark and Sweden saw control of Castleholm being fought over, but by 1537 Åland had been declared a royal castle county by King Gustaf Vasa of Sweden. The Russians occupied Åland in 1808 as part of the Napoleonic Wars, and in the following Treaty of Fredrikshamn, Sweden ceded all of Finland, including the islands, to Russia the following year. The Russians set about fortifying the islands, with a major fortification under construction in Bormesund from 1829 right up until it was attacked and totally destroyed by a combined Anglo-French invasion force as part of the Crimean War, who were taking the opportunity of an overstretched Russian military to open up fronts in both the Black and Baltic Seas. As a result of the Treaty of Paris in 1856 that brought an end to the Crimean War, the Åland Islands were demilitarised, and since then the islands have been neutral, with the citizens exempt from Finland's otherwise universal male conscription for national military service. At the same time as building Bormesund, the Russians had been building a new settlement close by which was intended to become the island's capital. However, with the damage inflicted in the war, the Russians decided it would make more sense to build a new capital for the islands in another location, and they settled on the small village of Ulvenäs on an isthmus that had the ability to have ports built on both sides of the settlement with quick access into the Baltic. The Russians decided to name the town after Maria Alexandrovna, the Empress of Russia, with the town being officially founded as Mariehamn on the 21st of February 1861. Over the following years, the city continued to expand to occupy the whole of the width of the isthmus, and today around 40% of the entire population of the Åland Islands call the city home. With the whirlwind of changes that took place in Russia following the 2 revolutions of 1917, Finland seized its chance for freedom and declared independence from Russia on the 6th of December 1917. There were disputes about the future of the islands, with campaigns for independence and for reunification with Sweden, but in the end, following discussions at the League of Nations, the international decision was that Åland Island should remain a part of Finland, but with wide-ranging cultural and political autonomy. Åland's regional parliament, the Landting, met for the first time on the 9th of June 1922. During the continuation war of the USSR, Finland militarised the islands to prevent them falling to the Soviets, with the navy taking control of the islands on the same day that the Nazis launched Operation Barbarossa, their invasion of Russia. Following the end of the war, the islands were demilitarised again. Mariehamn itself continued to grow, with many smaller towns and settlements incorporated into the city in time for its 100th birthday in 1961, meaning Mariehamn itself now covers the whole of the isthmus. From the top of the Vista point close to the centre of town, you can get views across the whole of the city and the width of the isthmus, as well as down the small fjords formed by the land heading out into the Baltic. Ever since the town's founding in the 19th century, the two harbours have been important to the business and economic life of the city and the islands more widely. The eastern port is today more focused around pleasure craft, recreation and fishing, whilst the western port is where the regular cruise ferries of Silja Line, Tallink and Viking dock multiple times a day as they link Mariehamn to Helsinki, Stockholm, Tallinn and Turku. Since 1999, the harbour and the island's unique economic position has caused a boom in traffic and tourism. Prior to 1999, it was possible to sell duty-free alcohol and tobacco on any ferry that was operating to another country, so for regular ferries crossing between Finland and Sweden or Sweden and Estonia plied a good trade in discount cigarettes and alcohol. But that all changed with new EU legislation that banned the sale of duty-free goods on any transport that was going between member states. With Estonia set to join the EU in 2004, that would have meant no routes on which duty-free could be sold. However, the unique status of the Åland Islands as being semi-autonomous created a useful loophole. Whilst the islands were a full part of the EU under Finland's membership, there had been two areas where they were allowed to opt out of EU rules, and those were on value-added tax and customs duty. For the purpose of these two areas, the Åland Islands are considered outside of the EU. So if your ferry from Stockholm goes directly to Helsinki, you can't sell duty-free. If your ferry has a 5-minute stop in Mariehamn, then you can sell duty and tax-free from the moment you cast off in Stockholm until the point you moor up in Helsinki. This explains why every night of the year at least a dozen ships, each of around 3,000 berths, dock in the port, let off a handful of passengers and vehicles, load a few more, and then depart in a choreography that takes less than 10 minutes to complete, making Mariehamn very well connected, even if it is mostly for tax avoidance purposes. As the ships generally dock overnight, a large number of Mariehamn's nightly visitors may not even be aware they visited the city, but despite its size, they're missing out on all the history and sights that the city has to offer. Over by the eastern harbour, a small maritime display shows the history of the construction of wooden boats that applied trade or fished from the coast of the islands, with examples of the techniques used to build the ships, as well as historic boats on display. Over by the western harbour is the much larger Ålands Sjöfartsmuseum, or Åland Maritime Museum. The collection can trace its history back to the 1920s and one person, Carl Holmqvist, who began collecting nautical objects that later became the core part of the original collection. With the era of sailing ships coming to an end, Holmqvist decided in 1935 to form a non-profit association named the Ålands Nautical Club, with the task of founding a maritime museum to keep alive the history of what had once been so common. The war intervened, with construction work on the museum building only being completed in 1949, with the original building being designed around the deck of a sailing ship. With artefacts giving the impression of being up on deck, with wheels, binnacles and a balcony that make you feel like you really are in the wheelhouse of a sailing ship. Down below are examples of internal rooms of ships, including the captain's quarters and officers' dining rooms. A major extension to the museum took place between 2009 and 2012, with a new extension opening below the original building down to the water level of the fjord, which houses a number of exhibits, including some of the larger artefacts that couldn't be displayed in the upstairs museum. Moored up alongside the museum is the museum ship Pommern, a four-masted steel bark, an iron-hulled sailing ship that was donated to the city of Mariehamn in 1953 and has been open to the public since 1957. Originally constructed in the J. Reed & Co. shipyard on the banks of the Clyde near Glasgow in 1903 as the Nimmer, the name of a muse of memory in Greek mythology, the ship originally worked out of Hamburg for a number of years, passing through various hands as shipping lines' fortunes waxed and waned. A move to a new owner who had all their ship names starting with P saw her being renamed to Pommern, where she was put to work on the lucrative saltpeter trade to Chile. Following World War I, the ship was handed over to Greece as war reparations before being purchased in 1923 by Gustav Eriksson for his shipping company, based in Mariehamn. The ship served for many years running grain from Australia to the UK and Ireland right up until the start of World War II. After the war, the need for sailing ships was rapidly fading, and the Pommern was considered too old to be suitable for refitting, so she was eventually donated to the city to become a museum ship. She is now one of the last remaining vessels of her type still preserved in floating condition. Pommern has a reputation for being a lucky ship, as she survived both world wars unscathed and across all her voyages only lost 4 crew members at sea. The Åland Museum is actually 2 separate institutions which since the opening of their current building in 1981 have been housed under the same roof. The Cultural History Museum of Åland has a permanent collection of artefacts on the history of the islands from the prehistoric through to the modern day, arranged in chronological order. There are 4 major sections to the museum, with the first looking at the prehistoric and early settlement of the island up until the arrival of the Swedish Empire in the 1200s. The second section looks at the time of the island spent as part of the Swedish Empire from the 1200s up until the beginning of the 19th century. The third section moves on to the island's history during its incorporation into Russia as part of the Grand Duchy of Finland. The fourth and final section runs from the independence of Finland from Russia and the island's autonomy through to the modern day. Other exhibits include a display of 20th century artefacts to make anyone over about 30 start to feel old. As well as a reconstruction of a pharmacy from the latter part of the 19th century. The other part of the Åland Museum is the Åland Islands Art Museum, which was originally founded in 1955. Today it houses a large collection of Åland art in its permanent collection, as well as temporary displays of local artists. Next time, I take a journey to discover the fortifications of Castleholm and its neighbouring open-air museum, before discovering the ruins of a Russian fort destroyed by the British.